in this episode, we're going to be speaking with Mr. Ravi Vishwanathan. And Ravi is the President of Growth Markets at Tata Consultancy Services. Ravi, first, thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you.
Right? So, could you define what growth markets are? Because I saw a whole list of companies underlisted that.
Countries, you mean?
Countries.
Sure. So we look at growth markets from two perspectives. One is, of course, that the emerging markets by nature are growth markets. But there are a lot of emerging economies, like Japan, for example, which has a tremendous GDP. They are the second largest spender in terms of IT in the world after the United States of America. And all of us know the contribution that Indian IT makes and the US market makes to the Indian IT. But what is not known is the fact that Japan, the second largest IT spender, hardly makes a decimal point dent in the balance sheets of the IT companies. And for that precise reason, we have defined a very large market, which we call growth markets from an IT industry perspective. And therefore, the growth markets does not necessarily mean they are emerging economies, but it's really where the opportunity for the IT industry is to grow.
So, for the benefit of viewers, what are all the different countries that oversee?
Sure. The way we look at growth markets, to put it very simply, anything outside of the US and Europe, including UK, everything outside of that is considered growth market.
Whoa!
It is a fairly large market that we look at.
And you're in charge of it globally.
I look at everything from Australia to China and then up to Africa.
So it's interesting you spoke about Japan, which is the second largest spender in IT, but yet it's a blip on our Indian services. Why is that? Why hasn't Indian IT companies cracked into the Japanese market?
It's very easy to say, therefore, that there is a language barrier and there is a culture barrier. But those are things that we need to now focus on. As we have grown as an industry, as companies have matured into what we call as Indian multinational companies, here is the opportunity for us. And I would say the market has fairly been unexplored because the hurdles were perceived to be much taller than what we believe now they actually are. Maybe 20 years ago they were true, that you want to concentrate in the markets where you want to dominate and you want to spend most of the efforts in making those markets. But we, for example, have been in Japan for now 25 years and we have tried different strategies, and I think we now kind of know what it takes to succeed in Japan. But you look at it this way, that there is an opportunity there, right? That's really what excites us.
So let me ask you, Ravi, what's the secret sauce?
Secret sauce for what?
For succeeding in Japan.
It's very difficult to say if there's a secret sauce, but I think it is a combination of what we can bring to the Japanese market with respect to what we know of deployment in the world, and also kind of blending it with the Japanese way of doing things, the Japanese culture, and also bring in a lot of local talent. How do I look at the Japanese universities as a fairly good supply chain? How do I mix all of this and create a market? Is that a secret sauce? Only time will tell. Right?
You're credited with taking TCS operations to Scandinavia and then making it extremely successful, so much so that it's one of the highest revenue generators for TCS.
Sure.
So walk us through that journey, right?
So it was 1994 when I went to Copenhagen, Denmark. At that time, TCS had no presence in Scandinavia, and Sikoli and Mr. Ramdurai said, here is a market that we would like to explore, and guess what, you're now the country manager responsible for Scandinavia. And I really thought it was a punishment posting. Right? what did I do? I've been a good servant, I've been doing very well, my appraisals seem pretty good. Taking a guy who lives in Chennai, 40 degrees centigrade, average temperature, 10.5 months a year, and putting him in a cold place like Copenhagen, Denmark. But it was a very exciting opportunity. I landed in Denmark and I realized that people just didn't know anything about India. So my first presentations, not first, always the first chart in my presentation to any CEO, any CIO would be a map of the world and say, here is India.
Wow.
Right? And here is India, and here is the sheer number of people with a professional degree and the ability, therefore, to be part of a computer or a software revolution which was happening at that time in India. And there were many apprehensions because what you get to see in Scandinavia, at least in those days, was only the tragic, I would say, incidents in India, which would be reported in the media. So people get to know, oh, there's a flood, there's a drought, there are so many people who are dying of poverty. But nobody talks about the fact that there is a huge IT revolution which is happening there. There is this fantastic supply chain. There's so many brilliant graduates who are coming out of the education system. All that was hidden in the heap of other things that he had done. So it is very important to actually go there and break the myth and say, hey, here is India. Here are the number of graduates. And by the way, we're already helping all these companies putting world-class systems. And slowly, the market started biting. Many people say, okay, we'll give it a shot. I particularly remember there was an incident where there was a plague in Surat in 94.
That's right.
And suddenly a big contract which we had won, they said, hold it, because we can't travel to India. And I had to tell them, okay, if there's a plague in Spain, would you be worried in Denmark? I said, no. There's a plague in Surat, which anyway the government is tackling. Nobody worries in Chennai because it's almost 1,600 kilometers away.
Right.
And nobody fathoms this because they don't realize that India is such a big country. So, cut a long story short, for me, going to Copenhagen and actually selling India was the first task. Selling Indian IT was next, and then TCS, right, in that order. It also gave me a tremendous opportunity in terms of exposure. Because what it taught me, until then I had only worked in English-speaking countries.
Okay.
I'd lived in the US for about 3.5, 4 years. I'd done a lot of programs out there, a lot of projects in UK. And then when I come here, it's a different culture, it's a different language. People speak English very slowly, and it's not their first language, so they get apprehensive when somebody speaks a language alien, and many times I had to explain to them that English is alien to me too.
Right.
But then it taught me that I need to customize the way even I speak, and how do I then communicate more effectively, because communicating with an English knowledgeable crowd is very different to that of something in Scandinavia. And so I always joke that I was a 78 RPM record, if you know that.
Yeah.
I had to cut it down not to 45 but to 33 RPMs, so that I literally used to speak when I came back from Denmark. I used to speak like, oh, hello, Ruba, how are you? I hope you are doing well. But that's the speed at which you need to talk. And these are small things, but you have to be immersed in the culture of the countries that you work in, and you have to be seen as somebody who is very appreciative. Because I went and learned Danish, not because I can make great conversation, but actually to say, hey, I'm making a serious effort to understand how these cultures are, and that's really appreciated. So it's a great opportunity.
So let me ask you this. Now, normally it would have made sense to find a leader with a very Danish background, obviously with the son of the soil.
Sure.
But they chose you.
Sure.
Right? So does it make, for somebody who is completely new and cracking a market, I know it's a great challenge, but what are your thoughts?
No, I mean, well, that could be true, typically, but if you see the evolution of the Indian IT industry, we had to have somebody who had a deep knowledge of how things get done in India. Somebody who had a passion about what happens in India. Somebody who can actually go and articulate new systems, new processes, which the world didn't know about. Now, how do I explain to somebody that in those days we used to recruit 300 people from the university? Today we do 30,000. But to say even 300 is a very big number in those days.
Yeah.
So we used to hire 300 people from this college and train them. And they would be wondering, how can you hire 300 people from one college? Today we hire 1,000 people from the same colleges, right? So I think there were paradigm shifts in scale that were happening, which were very, very audacious things that TCS and the IT industry in India were doing. So for somebody to go and actually play that out there, in the evolution stage, it was very important that it had to be somebody who was a son of this soil, who can go and articulate the value that Tata's, the TCS can bring into the organizations that you want to work with.
Ravi, for someone who's done such a pivotal role in taking companies into various countries and overseeing operations, what would be your advice for startup entrepreneurs who want to go global,
Sure.
but they are stuck? What would be your advice?
See, I think today the market is just phenomenal simply because we are living in a very connected world. It is not the same as 20 years ago. That's a great advantage. The barriers for entry have actually been removed. There aren't too many barriers. You could develop an application today on an iPad, on an Android, and you can sell it to the world. Your market are 3 billion digital citizens. You have to have that mindset. So for an entrepreneur, whatever service an entrepreneur is getting into, I think people have to start appreciating the fact today that you can deliver service from anywhere to any person in the connected world. And that really is the opportunity. So where typically you'll have people who are getting stuck are in finding out whether the right product mix, whether the right set of characteristics for a market is available. And I think that's where you probably need to spend more time, energy, research, and make sure that what you have has a very strong value that gets delivered across. I was explaining yesterday about how quick the market is. So you have to be extremely quick today on your feet. I was explaining yesterday that when the auto fares were introduced in Chennai, that my son said, hey, we can build an Android app and everybody can use it for paying 25 paisa a month. And before you could even write a program, write a code, there are 100 people who are thinking the same way. And somebody's already put that out in the Android store. You could download an auto meter application today from the Android store.
Wow.
Right? So it's a very agile world. It's a very, very fast, responsive world. And you have to be very quick. And if you have a feeling of getting stuck, I think you need to start looking at the mentor ecosystem that you will have. And it's very important that you create those mentor ecosystems or reach out to the mentor ecosystem. There is a good amount of mentoring which happens. There are enough people through the TIE, for example, through CII, through many of the associations, NASCOM. So there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to be mentored by people who have been there, done that.
So personally for you, how did mentorship help you and who were your mentors? What did you learn?
Absolutely. And so I had the privilege of working under some phenomenal leaders in TCS. So the first, the person who I adore is Mr. F.C. Kohli. Kohli is, we used to call him the father of IT. I think it's time we call him the grandfather of Indian IT. And there's something which he had spoken long back, which had a very lasting impact. In the mid-90s, I discovered that he had actually made a speech in a CII event in '74, where he said India could never have participated in the Industrial Revolution because she did not have the capital to perform a meaningful part in that Industrial Revolution. This is '74, and he says 20 years from now there will be a knowledge revolution, and India should just not participate, but we should lead the revolution because she has the capital, that is the knowledge capital, beyond anybody else's means, and therefore we should be leading that revolution. And for somebody to see that vision in '74 and being part of his team, obviously there's a huge impact. And then came along Mr. Ramadurai, who taught me basically that you have to be audacious in what you want to do. He set up, when we were $200 million, he said, how do we now look at creating a company which will be 10 billion by 2010? We had this 10 by 10 all over the walls of TCS in '99. And imagine for somebody to be having that audacity to say, hey, there's nothing wrong in dreaming that we will grow 50 times in 10 years. And then I remember asking him, sir, how do we do that? And then he said, go and figure that out, right? That's why you're on this team. And then he coached me into saying, looking at different perspectives and putting together, a TCS which is so different to today than what it was in 1998, 99. Complete transformation towards a goal which seemed audacious, and audacious goals are not normally met.
Right.
And today, I don't think anybody in the company has any disbelief, or there are no non-believers that this is an engine which can, change and deliver at a much higher speed as we believe today. We are in that space.
Ravi, talking of big audacious goals, it's one thing to set that big audacious goal, but it's another thing to walk the talk and really achieve that. So from your experience, how How do we make that work and achieve that goal?
If you take the business that we are in the services space and highly dependent on people. We have a very strong belief that there is a very strong ecosystem which delivers good, excellent, above average, whichever you want, you can pick talent which is coming out of the supply chain. But what makes that tick? What makes that tick is really about driving this passion down. If you can get teams to love their jobs and create that energy in them and look at that audacious goal as something which is part of their vision or which is part of their goal, which is part of their day-to-day existence, then I think we can form a highly synergized team. And nothing can deliver better than a synergized team. You know, I don't think we need 11 Tendulkars in the Indian cricket team. In fact, we'll fail miserably if we do that. We need a team which is made up of different performing people, and they're all going to come together like in a concert. You just can't have one vocalist and a violinist. You need to have a whole team, and they will, then the conductor will have the arduous task of getting them all together.
Sure.
But when they come together and all their notes are in sync, the music is just absolutely harmonious. It's very similar in a team-based company like ours. The team is the most important part. There's an old saying, right, which says that the strength of the wolf is in the pack, and the strength of the pack is the wolf. And that's what we have lived in TCS. I don't think there is ever a situation where we feel that in the team there's one hero, or the team thinks there's one hero, or the hero thinks there's one team is one team, right? And I think it's something which we have lived in TCS, and we very strongly believe in this team concept, team culture, and we have fostered a very family-like environment within TCS, and that's really what we think has helped us in this journey. Talking about audacity, I remember going in 2004 to a campus and making a pre-placement talk, and we said top 10 by 2010 is our vision. There's a young kid who put up his hand and said, "Sir, I have a question." And I said, "Yes, can I ask you why you didn't think that you should be number one by 2010? And by that time the goalposts have changed. We had already become a $1 billion+ company. We were growing at a fairly voracious pace, and people are noticing this. And this young kid stands up, puts his hands up, and says, "Why didn't you think you should be number one? Why did you say top 10? And see, everybody has their perspectives. And for me, it was a defining moment, because there was a recognition out there that, God, this company can be the best in the world. Why are they trying to underperform? And I think that's what drives you all the time. It's not about saying, hey, we are top 10. But what next? How do you now get to a point where customers believe that you are the company that they want to keep?
Amazing.
Right? So I think it was a defining moment for all of us. I remember going back and telling our current CEO, he was the COO then, "Chandra, this is what I heard." I said, "Brilliant." Right? So.
Ravi, another amazing thing I noticed in your profile. Now, not only are you the president of growth markets, which is like so many countries, but you also manage 45,000 people in the Chennai center, which is one of the biggest. In my opinion, each one of these roles is more than full-time jobs. How do you manage these two?
Yeah, I think a little bit of history. So we are organized as branches before we reorganized towards verticals and markets. So at that time, Chennai was about, when I became the head of Chennai operations, we were about 5,000 strong, and over about 5 years we grew to about 40,000. So at that time the job was not only to get the execution of what we had promised to our customers, but also about creating the scale, creating the infrastructure, creating the ecosystem, building the relationship with the colleges, building the relationship with other stakeholders. As we moved to a vertical organization, it was more about, so the job that you just mentioned, that about being the head of operations, that's really about making sure that we keep all of the office part, the administrative part, the PR part, the supply chain part, all of that. But the core business itself has moved into different vertical units. So it kind of makes my job easier. So I call it, my day job is being the P&L owner for the growth markets, but my night job is to make sure that all the things which are supposed to go unnoticed really gets unnoticed, right? So making sure the campus is fine, making sure the PR agencies are fine, making sure the academic interfaces are fine, making the administration is fine, making sure that the Chennai level HR functions are fine, all of that.
Amazing. How do you make the most of your time in terms of, now the question is about time management skills, and what little tweaks that you make to make your work more productive? Anything secrets you want to share?
I think the good thing about, so people ask me a slightly different question is, how do you manage work-life balance? And I always ask people, so define work and define life, right? So it depends. Everybody has their own definitions. And I remember somebody else asking me, why do you think work is not life, right? But I think the key thing is today technology has enabled you to do a lot of things. You're multitasking all the time, right? So I'm in the middle of a meeting, I get an SMS from my son saying, Dad, I want to come home this weekend. Can you get me book a Tatkal ticket? And on the way back from the meeting, I'm sitting in the car, I'm opening my iPad and booking my ticket. It couldn't have been possible earlier, right? I would have probably had to go home at 6 o'clock, call some travel agent or whatever. So I think today there is a crisscross between all of this, and therefore the ability to multitask happens. But then that's a dangerous position to be in too.
I know.
You got to make sure that your priorities are right. So the simple thing is, I have a list of things I want to do in the day, and they are my top priorities. I will have to do A, B, C, D, E, and nothing will compromise on that. And many times I can do all of them in maybe 3-4 hours. Sometimes it takes more than a day, but you got to balance that. So as long as you have a clear thing in your mind, these are the things that I want to, because you can't do everything, right? I had this dilemma when I moved into a leadership role. A lot of people want to meet you.
I know.
And I used to do that. And I used to find no time to do what I wanted to do.
You preempted my next question.
Okay.
Carry on. So that was the thing. At a man at your position, I'm sure there are so many people waiting for your command or your decision. How do you manage that?
Yeah. So when I go back home, I'll say, I was talking to this person. He had a career situation, he had a mentoring situation, and I'm glad I helped. But when I look at the balance sheet at the end of the day, I said, God, I didn't execute what I wanted to do. So then came the big, what I call wake-up moment, was when that happened for 3 or 4 days. You get stressed out because you're not doing the things you're supposed to do, but your day is filled up. So key question I asked was, are you meeting the people whom you want to, or are you meeting the people who want to meet you? And as long as, once you know that, then it's easy.
Okay.
So I think that's key. It's not that you don't have time for everybody. You want to make time, but you want to make sure that you meet the people whom you want to, and then find the time to meet the people who want to meet you.
Beautiful.
If you can do that, then you can manage your time much better, right?
That's amazing. So 2 last questions. So the one is, I want you to look back in your life, not just professional life, also your entire life. And what has been the high point in your life, high points in your life that you look with pride?
Okay. I guess the highest point was the birth of my son. So it was probably something which is magic, and I always say that it's a very sentimental thing, but not that my daughter was not, but that is the day when you realize that you're more than what you think you want. Of course, from a professional perspective, I think the big shift happened for me when I went to Denmark as head of Scandinavia. For me, going there and executing the plans, one is, like you rightly said, one is to put the strategy, the other is executing them, and executing the plan and creating that foundation on which we today have grown the entire company. If you look at it, everybody has played their part in creating those foundation elements. That was a high point. And then the next big point came when I actually was seconded from TCS to Tata Teleservices, where I was the general manager of information technology. So I was, I think, employee number 5 or 10 or something like that. And creating the entire IT organization for a customer. Actually, you are the customer. You are now seconded there. And creating that whole ecosystem, creating that environment, it's a completely different job than being a consultant. And being a part of a larger company's strategic plan and how you're putting the wheels together to make the train run was a phenomenal experience. the learning was just unbelievable. I would probably call it the highest point in terms of learning, something which was completely new to me. I had been in manufacturing sector for a very long time. First time I moved to a telecom sector. I think the other big thing which is very dimensionally different, I'm choosing things which are very dimensionally different, was when I became the head of Chennai, and we were now looking at growing the Chennai operations from about 3,000, 4,000 to something like 40,000, right? And you were talking about scale, talking about integration, bringing in a lot of new people, you are investing in infrastructure, bringing all of those up, and all of them have to tie up together so that it meets with A, the plan that you have from the supply side, and B, from the demand side. How do I bring all of that together? And creating this phenomenal place called TCS Chennai, which today has got 60 plus thousand people. So the foundation for building those scale parts was something, and I think what I'm doing now is absolutely different. It's managing a market or a whole bunch of markets, which are characteristically very different. They have their own idiosyncrasies, cultures, languages, kind of perceptions people have about India, Indian IT, TCS, all of that. And it's different in every different place. In Africa, in Asia, in Australia, China, India, people have different perceptions of who you are, what you are. And you are the same guy, or the same person, or the same team, and the same company. How do you make sure that you kind of manage these variances and continue to create that value? So I've been very, very lucky that I've had multiple roles, almost a new role every three to 4 years. And that helps in a very big way because the exposure is just, you can't get it anywhere else, right? And that's something which I've been lucky with. But if we were to call those are 4 different points, I would say those are 4 well-defined points in my graph so far.
Ravi, I want you to rewind back your life, and if you were to become a 17-year-old boy and relive your life, how would you live it differently? This is a question for youngsters and students watching this podcast, so that they can learn from you and they can become better people.
When I was in college, I used to always, I used to feel that I wasn't probably putting as much effort as I should. But I enjoyed my college life, like every single college student should do that. Because when I'm rewinding, I said, oh, there's so many things I could have done in the college, which I didn't. Oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. But the message I told my son when he joined engineering was, just enjoy the next 4 years. I mean, it's the best time of your life. But what I think helped me a lot was the ability to meet different people in the campus, interact with them, create a very different social network. And that helped my learning, because I just want to say, every business is about teams. It's never about individuals. Every company is about teams. It's never about individuals. You need to have the Tendulkars and the Dhonis and in your team, but you're just a part of that team, right? The biggest thing that I probably will tell people who are in campuses, never think that your learning stops at the end of the campus. In fact, it just starts after you leave college. What you're doing in college is a lot of rote, a lot of things which you like, you don't like, but please take away the learning aspect and keep it with you. Keep it here and use that every day, because you're going to face so many new things in your life. And if you have the ability to quickly adapt and learn, you'll be extremely successful. I think the key thing is, don't lose the learning trait ever. When I left campus, I thought I've read the last line in a book. I don't need to do that anymore. And I'm so glad that it's not true, because it's been such a phenomenal journey where you have to be in touch with technology, with people, with management skills, and customer, I would say, management. How do I bring all of them together and learn every day to make these 3 or 4 dimensions better every day? So learning is something which is the only constant.
Ravi, this would rank among the most interesting conversations I've had with people. Thank you so much for your time. Such a pleasure and inspiration.
Thank you, Krupa.
Thank you
Really
so
appreciate
much.
it.